Clara's feet had barely touched Montana soil when Silas Cade's first words cut through her like a winter blade. "Don't smile at me like that. Don't look at me with those hopeful eyes. I'm not the man you think I am." His voice was raw, broken. "My first wife died screaming my name, begging me to save her and our baby. I couldn't. So I buried them both and swore I'd never love again. You're here because I need help running this land, nothing more. If you're expecting warmth or affection or anything resembling a real marriage, turn around and get back on that stagecoach right now. Because all I have left to give you is cold silence and empty rooms." Before we continue with Silas and Clara's story, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Stay with us until the very end to see how this cold arrangement transforms into something neither of them expected. And comment below with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Clara's fingers gripped the handle of her worn carpet bag so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She stood there on that platform, the November wind whipping her dark hair across her face, and she didn't wipe away the tears that had started to form. She just looked at him, this tall, weathered man with eyes like flint and a mouth set in a hard line. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Cade," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I should tell you something right now, before we go any further." "What's that?" "I'm not here because I had nowhere else to go. I had options back in Ohio. 3 marriage proposals, actually. 2 from merchants, 1 from a banker." She lifted her chin. "I chose you because your letter was the only honest one I received. You didn't promise me romance or comfort or happiness. You promised me exactly what you just said. A transaction. And honesty, Mr. Cade, is worth more to me than pretty lies." Silas stared at her for a long moment, something flickering behind those cold eyes. "You're either the smartest woman I've ever met, or the biggest fool." "I've been called both." Clara picked up her bag. "Now, are you going to show me to this cabin, or are we going to freeze to death on this platform discussing my character?" The ride to his property took 40 minutes, and neither of them spoke a single word. The wagon rattled over frozen ground, and Clara studied the man beside her from the corner of her eye. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hands gripped the reins with a tension that suggested he was holding on to more than just leather straps. When the cabin finally came into view, Clara felt her heart sink, despite her best efforts. It was small, gray, and looked about as welcoming as a tomb. "It's not much," Silas said flatly, pulling the wagon to a stop. "It's shelter," Clara replied. "That's more than some people have. You don't have to pretend to be grateful." "I'm not pretending, Mr. Cade. I'm being realistic." She climbed down from the wagon before he could offer help, which, she suspected, he had no intention of doing anyway. "I've lived in worse places. My first husband's house in Cincinnati had rats in the walls and mold in every corner. This looks like a palace compared to that." Silas froze in the act of unhitching the horses. "Your first husband? You didn't ask if I'd been married before? You just asked if I was married now." Clara pulled her bag from the wagon bed. "I was married for 8 years to a man who drank away every cent we had and blamed me for his failures. When he finally drank himself to death 2 years ago, I swore I'd never marry again unless it was on my own terms. Your letter offered me exactly that." Jesus Christ. Silas ran a hand over his face. "You're a widow." "So are you, according to your letter." Clara met his eyes directly. "Does that change anything?" "It changes—" He stopped, jaw working. "It changes everything and nothing. Come on, let's get you inside before dark." The cabin was exactly as Clara expected, sparse, cold, and utterly devoid of any warmth or personality. A rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, a single bed in the corner. No curtains, no rugs, nothing soft or welcoming. "You'll take the bed," Silas said, dropping her bag by the door. "I'll sleep by the fire." "That's not necessary." "It's not up for discussion." His tone brooked no argument. "I'll get a fire going. There's beans and coffee in the cupboard if you're hungry." Clara watched him kneel by the fireplace, his movements precise and practiced. "Mr. Cade, we should probably establish some ground rules." "I already told you the rules." "You told me your rules. I have some of my own." She unbuttoned her coat, hanging it on a peg by the door. "First, I'll cook and clean and manage this household. But I won't be silent about it. If something needs fixing or buying, I'll tell you. If I think you're making a mistake, I'll say so. I spent 8 years biting my tongue, and I'm done with that." Silas didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed. "Second?" "Second, I don't expect you to love me, but I do expect basic respect. That means you don't speak to me like I'm stupid or useless, and I'll extend you the same courtesy." "Third?" "Third," Clara paused, choosing her words carefully. "I know you're grieving. I can see it in every line of your face, in the way you hold yourself, in the emptiness of this cabin. I won't push you to talk about it, but if you ever want to, I'll listen. No judgment, no pity, just listening." The fire caught, flames licking up around the kindling. Silas stood slowly, his back still to her. When he finally turned, his expression was unreadable. "You finished?" "For now." "Good, because I've got a rule of my own." He crossed his arms. "We don't talk about the past, yours or mine. What happened before you stepped off that stage doesn't matter anymore. We're starting from nothing, and that's exactly where we'll stay. Understood?" Clara felt something twist in her chest. Not anger, but a deep, aching sadness. This man was so determined to stay buried in his pain that he couldn't even acknowledge it existed. "I understand," she said quietly. "But you should know something, Mr. Cade." "What's that?" "Nothing doesn't exist. You can pretend the past is dead and buried, but it follows us everywhere. It's in every choice we make, every word we don't say. You can call this nothing all you want, but we both know that's a lie." Silas's jaw clenched. "You're a sharp-tongued woman." "You knew that when you read my letter. I told you I wouldn't be meek or silent." "So you did." He grabbed his coat from the back of a chair. "I'm going to check on the horses and chop some more wood. Make yourself at home, Mrs. Cade." The door slammed behind him, and Clara stood alone in the silent cabin. She didn't cry. She'd cried enough tears in her life to know they changed nothing. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time Silas returned, 2 hours later, arms loaded with firewood, the cabin had transformed. Clara had scrubbed the table and chairs, swept the floor, organized the meager supplies in the cupboard, and set out a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. She'd also found a faded quilt in the chest at the foot of the bed and draped it over the table as a cloth. Silas stopped in the doorway, staring. "That was my mother's quilt," he said, his voice strange. "I found it in the chest. I thought—" Clara started to stand. "If you don't want me to use it—" "No." He set down the wood, moving toward the table slowly. His fingers traced the edge of the quilt, and Clara saw his hand tremble. "No, she would have wanted it used. She made it for—" He stopped abruptly. "It should be used." They ate in silence, but it was a different silence than before. Clara watched Silas carefully, noting how he kept his eyes on this plate, how his jaw worked as if he were chewing on words he wouldn't let out. My mother taught me to quilt, Clara said finally. I was never very good at it. My stitches were always crooked, and I couldn't keep the pattern straight to save my life. But she was patient. She'd sit with me for hours, showing me the same stitch over and over until I got it right. Silas looked up, and for the first time, she saw something other than coldness in his eyes. When did she die? Last year. Influenza. Clara took a sip of coffee. I know you said we don't talk about the past, but sometimes the past needs to be acknowledged. Not dwelled on, just acknowledged. Acknowledged, Silas repeated slowly. That's a fancy word for opening old wounds. Or for letting them heal properly instead of festering. He set down his fork with deliberate care. You're going to be a problem, aren't you? Probably. Clara didn't smile, but something softened in her expression. But I'll be a useful problem. This cabin will be clean, your meals will be hot, and your clothes will be mended. And in return, you'll give me a roof over my head and the freedom to live without fear. That's the transaction we agreed to. And all this talk about the past and healing and acknowledging wounds? That's just me being human, Mr. Cade. You can ignore it if you want, but I won't stop being human just to make you more comfortable. Silas pushed back from the table and stood. I'm going to turn in. Thank you for the meal. You're welcome. He paused at the door to the bedroom. Clara? It was the first time he'd used her first name.
Yes?
My first wife's name was Rebecca. She died in childbirth 3 years ago. The baby died too. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Clara could hear the agony beneath it. I'm telling you this once, and we're never speaking of it again. But you should know why this cabin feels like a tomb. Because for 3 years, that's exactly what it's been. Before Clara could respond, he disappeared into the bedroom and shut the door. Clara sat at the table for a long time after that, her coffee growing cold in her cup. She understood now. Understood the emptiness, the anger, the determination to feel nothing. Silas Cade hadn't hired a wife. He'd hired a housekeeper, because hiring someone to share his grief was too terrifying to contemplate. But Clara hadn't come to Montana to be just a housekeeper. She'd come to build a new life, and whether Silas liked it or not, that meant building it together. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn to find Silas already gone. A note on the table read, "Gone to check the fence line. Back by noon. Don't wait on breakfast." Clara crumpled the note and tossed it in the fire. Then she made a full breakfast, eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy, and left it warming by the hearth. When Silas returned at 11:30, his face was wind-burned and his mood was foul. "I told you not to wait on breakfast," he said, shrugging out of his coat. "I didn't wait. I cooked. There's a difference." Clara handed him a plate. "Eat before it gets cold." He ate standing up, shoveling food into his mouth like a man who'd forgotten what a proper meal tasted like. When he finished, he set the plate down with a heavy thud. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know. I wanted to." Clara took the plate to wash it. "How's the fence?" "Needs work. Always needs work." He sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "Listen. About last night. You don't need to explain anything." "I'm not explaining. I'm making something clear." His voice was hard again, defensive. "What I told you doesn't change our arrangement. We're still just a transaction." "I know." Clara dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him. "Mr. Cade, you can say that word 100 times, and it won't make it true. But if it makes you feel safer to pretend that's all this is, then pretend away. I'm not going to argue with you about it." "Safer." His laugh was bitter. "You think I'm scared?" "I think you're terrified, and I think you have every right to be." Clara sat down across from him. "Losing someone you love doesn't just break your heart, Mr. Cade. It breaks your trust in the world. It makes you believe that caring about anything or anyone is just setting yourself up for more pain. I know because I felt the same way after my mother died. Still feel it sometimes. Silas's hands clenched into fists on the table. You don't know anything about how I feel. You're right, I don't. But I know how I feel, and I suspect we're not so different. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not here to fix you or heal you or make you feel anything you don't want to feel. But I am here, and I'm not going anywhere. And eventually, you're going to have to accept that. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Silas stood abruptly. I've got work to do, he said gruffly. I'm sure you do. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door, but stopped with his hand on the latch. Clara? Yes? Those biscuits. They were good. Better than good, actually. Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with the ghost of something that might have been gratitude. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Silas would leave at dawn and return at dusk, and Clara would keep the cabin running. She cooked, cleaned, mended, and organized. But she also did something else. She started making the cabin feel like a home. She found wildflowers growing near the creek and put them in a jar on the table. She hung curtains she'd sewn from an old sheet. She arranged Silas's books, the few he had, on a shelf she'd cleared and dusted. Silas never commented on these changes, but Clara noticed he started coming home earlier. And he started lingering at the table after meals, instead of disappearing immediately. One evening, about 2 weeks after Clara's arrival, Silas came home to find her struggling to move the heavy chest from the bedroom into the main room. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, dropping his tools and rushing over. "Moving this chest. I thought it would be better out here, and then I could—" "You're going to hurt yourself." He grabbed one end of the chest. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Together, they lifted the chest and carried it to the spot Clara had cleared by the wall. When they set it down, they were both breathing hard, and Clara's hair had come loose from its pins. "Thank you," she said, pushing the hair out of her face. "What's the point of moving it?" "So you can use it as a seat by the fire, and so I can store my sewing supplies in it without them being in the bedroom." Clara opened the chest and started pulling out old blankets. "Plus, it gives us more space in the—" She stopped abruptly, her hand closing around something small and hard. When she pulled it out, she saw it was a tiny knitted bootie, pale yellow and impossibly small. The air in the cabin went deathly still. Silas's face had gone completely white. "Give me that." "Mr. Cade." "Give me that." His voice shook with barely contained rage. Clara handed it over without a word, and Silas snatched it from her hand. He stared at it for a long moment, his jaw working, his breathing harsh. Then he turned and threw it into the fire. "No!" Clara lunged forward, but Silas caught her arm. "Don't." "That was your child's—" "I know what it was." He released her arm and stepped back, running both hands through his hair. "Christ, I know what it was. Rebecca made a whole set of 'em. 6 pairs. She was so sure, so damn sure everything would be fine." Clara watched the booty curl and blacken in the flames, her heart breaking for this broken man. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Nobody ever means to." Silas's voice was hollow. "But it happens anyway. Pain just keeps happening, over and over, no matter how much you try to bury it." "Then maybe you should stop trying to bury it." His head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me." Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "You keep all this grief locked up inside you, and you think that makes you strong. But it doesn't, Mr. Cade. It just makes you alone." "I'd rather be alone than—" "Then what? Then risk caring about someone again? Then risk being happy? Clara took a step toward him. Is that really how you want to spend the rest of your life? Because if it is, you should have stayed alone. You shouldn't have sent for me. I sent for you because I needed help running this place. Liar. The word was soft, but devastating. You sent for me because you couldn't stand the silence anymore. You sent for me because deep down, somewhere beneath all that anger and grief, you know you can't live like this forever. Silas's hands were shaking. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Clara moved closer still. I know what it's like to wake up every morning wishing you hadn't. I know what it's like to go through the motions of living without actually being alive. I spent 2 years like that after my mother died. And if I hadn't made a choice to change it, I'd still be there. Lost. Empty. Barely existing. And you think coming to Montana changed that? I think making a choice changed it. Any choice. Moving forward instead of staying stuck. Clara's eyes held his. You sent for me because some part of you, no matter how small, wanted to move forward too. You just can't admit it yet. Silas turned away from her, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. What if I can't? What if this, he gestured vaguely at himself, is all I have left? Then we'll work with that, Clara said simply. But I don't believe it's all you have left, and I don't think you believe it either. The next morning, when Clara woke up, she found a small wooden box on the table. Inside were the remaining 5 pairs of baby booties, carefully folded and preserved. Silas was gone, as usual, but there was a note. You were right. Some things shouldn't be burned. S. Clara closed the box gently and placed it back in the chest, her throat tight with emotion. It wasn't love. It wasn't even friendship yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning was all you needed. That small gesture changed something between them, though neither would have called it softness. Over the next week, Silas started talking. Not about Rebecca or the baby. Those wounds were still too raw. But about small things. The quality of the hay. A coyote he'd spotted near the north pasture. A fence post that needed replacing before winter hit hard. Clara listened to every word, responding with her own observations. She'd noticed the henhouse door was hanging crooked. The roof over the porch leaked when it rained. The well water had started tasting strange. I'll fix the henhouse door tomorrow, Silas said one evening over supper. And I'll check the well. My father taught me how to clean them. Silas looked up from his plate. Your father taught you to clean wells? My father taught me a lot of things most women don't learn. He had 5 daughters and no sons. We all learned to do what needed doing. Clara buttered a piece of bread. I can also shoe a horse, mend a fence, and shoot a rifle well enough to hit what I'm aiming at. You're full of surprises, Mrs. Cade. So are you, Mr. Cade. Clara met his eyes. For instance, I'm surprised you haven't asked me to stop calling you Mr. Cade. We've been married 3 weeks now. Would you prefer I call you Clara? I prefer we both stop being so damn formal with each other. It's exhausting. Silas's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. All right, Clara, you can call me Silas. Thank you, Silas. She said his name deliberately, testing how it felt. That wasn't so hard, was it? Harder than you'd think. The honesty in his voice made Clara pause. She set down her bread and looked at him carefully. Why? Because using your first name makes this feel real. And if it feels real, then... He stopped, jaw clenching. Then it might hurt when it ends, Clara finished quietly. I know. I feel it too. They sat in silence for a moment. the weight of that admission hanging between them. "It doesn't have to end," Silas said finally, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. "No," Clara agreed. "It doesn't." But the universe had different plans. 2 days later, a rider came tearing up to the cabin just after dawn. Clara heard the hoofbeats and rushed outside to find a young man she didn't recognize practically falling off his horse. "Where's Cade?" he gasped. "In the barn. What's wrong?" "Land grabbers. They hit the Henderson place last night. Burned them out. Old man Henderson's dead, and his wife's barely alive. They're coming this way, hitting all the small homesteads." The young man, barely 20, Clara realized, was shaking. "Sheriff's trying to round up men to stop them, but there's at least a dozen of them, maybe more." Silas emerged from the barn, his face grim. "How many men does the sheriff have?" "Maybe 8, including me. We need every able-bodied man." The rider looked at Clara. "Ma'am, you should pack what you can carry and get to town. It's not safe out here." "I'm not leaving," Clara said immediately. "Clara," Silas started, "I said I'm not leaving. This is my home, too." She turned to the rider. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe. They move fast, and they don't leave witnesses." Silas's expression was unreadable. "Go tell the sheriff I'll be there in 20 minutes, and send someone to warn the Mitchells and the Coopers." The rider nodded and rode off, leaving Silas and Clara standing in the yard. "You need to go to town," Silas said, his voice hard. "No." "Clara, these men are killers. They burned the Hendersons alive in their own home." "Then you'll need someone watching your back here, someone who can shoot." Clara crossed her arms. "You said I could hit what I aim at. Let me prove it." "This isn't a game." "I know it's not a game." Clara's voice rose to match his. "The Hendersons are dead. More people will die if these bastards aren't stopped. So you can either waste time arguing with me, or you can accept that I'm staying and tell me what needs to be done." Silas stared at her for a long moment, and Clara saw something shift in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or respect. Possibly both. "Can you really shoot?" he asked. "Try me." He went into the cabin and came out with 2 rifles and a handgun. He handed Clara one of the rifles, then set up a row of tin cans on the fence post 30 yards away. "Show me," he said. Clara raised the rifle, sighted carefully, and fired 5 times in quick succession. All 5 cans flew off the post. Silas's eyebrows rose. "Jesus Christ! Your father taught you well." "My father taught me to survive. Now tell me the plan." They spent the next 15 minutes preparing. Silas loaded every weapon they had: 3 rifles, 2 handguns, and an old shotgun that had belonged to his father. Clara filled buckets with water and placed them strategically around the cabin in case of fire. They moved everything valuable into the root cellar and covered the entrance with dirt and brush. "If they come while I'm gone," Silas said, checking his rifle one last time, "you get in that cellar and you don't come out until you hear my voice. Understand?" "And if I don't hear your voice?" His jaw tightened. "Then you wait until tomorrow morning and you ride to town as fast as that horse can carry you." "Silas." "Promise me, Clara." His hands gripped her shoulders, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid." "I'll promise if you promise the same thing." "I'm not the one staying here alone." "No, you're the one riding into a fight with a dozen armed killers. So promise me, Silas Cade, that you'll come back. Because I didn't come all the way to Montana just to become a widow twice over." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Silas's hands were still on her shoulders, and Clara could feel them trembling. "I'll come back," he said roughly. "I swear it." Then he did something that shocked them both. He pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. It lasted only seconds, but Clara felt the desperation in it, the fear, the unspoken things neither of them was ready to say. When he pulled away, his face was closed off again, guarded. "Stay safe." "You too." Clara watched him right away, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Then she picked up the rifle and went to watch the road. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Clara positioned herself by the window, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the horizon. Every sound made her jump. The wind rattling the shutters, a bird taking flight, the creak of the cabin settling. As the sun climbed higher, her nerves stretched tighter. She tried to stay calm, tried to focus, but her mind kept conjuring horrible images. Silas lying dead in the dirt, the cabin burning, those men coming for her. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "Fear won't help you. Focus." Around midday, she heard it, the distant crack of gunfire. Not close, but not far either. Maybe 3 miles south, near where the Henderson place had been. The shots came in bursts, rapid and chaotic, then fell silent. Clara's hands tightened on the rifle. She waited, listening so hard her head ached. More shots, closer this time. Then hoofbeats, coming fast. Clara moved away from the window and positioned herself behind the door, rifle raised. Her heart was hammering, her mouth dry. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer, until... "Clara, it's me!" She nearly collapsed with relief. She threw open the door to find Silas dismounting, his face streaked with dirt and what might have been blood. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, rushing to him. "Not my blood." He grabbed her arm, his eyes wild. "We scattered them, but 3 broke away and headed this direction. They'll be here any minute. We need to—" He didn't get to finish. 3 riders appeared over the rise, coming at a full gallop. Silas shoved Clara toward the cabin. "Get inside, now!" But Clara had already raised her rifle. She sighted on the lead rider and fired. The man jerked backward and fell from his saddle. "I said get inside," Silas roared, firing his own rifle. "I'm not hiding while you fight alone." Clara fired again, missing this time. The remaining 2 riders split up, one circling toward the barn, the other heading for the cabin. Silas shot at the one near the barn, clipping him in the shoulder. The man wheeled his horse around, cursing. Clara focused on the one charging the cabin. He was close now, close enough that she could see the cruel set of his mouth, the gun in his hand, rising to aim at Silas. She didn't think. She just fired. The man's head snapped back, and he toppled from his horse. The animal kept running, dragging its dead rider. Clara stood frozen, staring at what she'd done. She'd killed a man. She'd actually killed another human being. "Clara!" Silas grabbed her and pulled her down, just as a bullet splintered the doorframe where her head had been. The wounded rider was firing from behind the water trough, his aim wild but dangerous. Silas fired back, forcing the man to duck. "Reload!" Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely manage it, but she got fresh rounds into the rifle. Silas fired again and again, keeping the shooter pinned. "On 3, we rush him," Silas said. "You go left, I go right. He can't shoot us both." "That's your plan?" "You got a better one?" "Give me 30 seconds. Clara handed him her rifle and grabbed the handgun. Then, before he could stop her, she ran to the back of the cabin. "Clara! God damn it!" She ignored him, circling around behind the barn. Her heart was trying to beat out of her chest, and her hands were still shaking, but she kept moving. She could hear Silas still firing, keeping the man's attention forward. Clara crept around the side of the barn until she could see the water trough. The shooter was focused entirely on Silas, reloading his own weapon. Clara raised the handgun, took a breath, and stepped into the open. "Drop it!" she shouted. The man spun toward her, and Clara saw his eyes widen in surprise. Then his face twisted with rage, and he started to raise his gun. Clara fired first, then again, and again. The man crumpled. Silas appeared at a run, rifle ready, his face white. "Are you out of your mind? He could have killed you!" "But he didn't." Clara lowered the handgun, staring at the second body. "Is he?" "He's dead." Silas gently took the gun from her hand. "You did what you had to do." "I killed 2 men." Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and hollow. "I took 2 human lives."
"They would have killed us both without hesitation." Silas turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders again.
"Listen to me, Clara. You're not a murderer. You're a survivor. There's a difference." Clara wanted to believe him, but all she could see were those 2 bodies lying in the dirt. 2 men who'd woken up this morning alive and were now dead because of her. Her legs gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the ground, lowering them both into a sitting position. He held her while she shook, not saying anything, just holding her. "I thought I was ready," Clara whispered. "I thought I knew what it would be like." Nobody knows what it's like until it happens. Silas's voice was rough. And then you have to live with it. They sat there for a long time, while the adrenaline drained away and left them both exhausted. Finally, Silas stirred. "We need to deal with the bodies, and I need to ride back and tell the sheriff what happened here." He helped Clara to her feet. "Can you manage?" Clara straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "I can manage." They worked in grim silence, dragging the bodies away from the cabin. Silas would take them to town later, he said. For now, they needed to secure the property and make sure no more riders were coming. As the sun began to set, Silas finally allowed himself to check on Clara properly. She was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, staring at nothing. "Talk to me," he said quietly, sitting across from her. "About what?" "About whatever's going through your head right now." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that I came to Montana to start a new life, and in less than a month, I've killed 2 men. I'm thinking that I should feel guilty or horrified or something, but mostly I just feel numb." "That's normal." "Is it?" She finally met his eyes. "Is it normal to sit here and wonder if those men had families? If they had wives or children who'll never know what happened to them? Those men made their choices. They chose to terrorize and murder innocent people. They chose to come here with violence in their hearts." Silas reached across the table and took her hand. "You didn't choose that, Clara. You just chose to survive it." Clara looked down at their joined hands. Silas's palm was calloused and warm, and she found herself holding on tighter than she probably should. "When I fired that first shot," she said softly, "all I could think was that if I didn't, you'd die. And I couldn't let that happen." Silas was very still. "Why?" "Because—" Clara stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Because she cared about him? Because in 3 short weeks he'd become important to her? Because the thought of losing him made her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt since her mother died? "Because you're my husband," she said finally, taking the coward's way out. But Silas wasn't buying it. "Is that the only reason?" "Does it matter?" "It might." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her throat tighten. Clara, what you did today, what you risked for me, what we both risked for each other, she corrected. Fair enough, he smiled, and it was a real smile this time, small but genuine. We make a good team. We do, Clara returned the smile, though I'd prefer our next collaboration doesn't involve quite so much bloodshed. Agreed. They sat there in the fading light, hands still clasped, neither wanting to let go. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Inside, something had shifted between them again. Another wall coming down, another barrier crumbling. I should go check on the horses, Silas said, but he didn't move. You should, Clara agreed, but she didn't release his hand. Clara? Yes? I'm glad you didn't go to town. I'm glad you stayed. He paused, then added, even if you scared the hell out of me. I scared myself, Clara admitted. But I'd do it again. In a heartbeat. I know you would. That's what scares me most. He stood then, finally letting go of her hand, and Clara felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. She watched him walk to the door, his shoulders tense, his movements deliberate. He stopped with his hand on the latch. I need to tell you something. What? When those riders showed up, and I saw you standing there with that rifle, refusing to hide, his voice cracked. All I could think was that I couldn't lose you. Not you too. Clara's breath caught. Silas, I know what we said. I know this was supposed to be just a transaction, just an arrangement. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being that. At least for me. He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes made Clara's heart stutter. I don't know what to call this thing between us. I don't know if I'm ready to call it anything. But I need you to know that it's real, and it terrifies me. Clara stood slowly, her legs unsteady. It terrifies me, too. Why? Because caring about someone means you can lose them, and I've lost enough people in my life to know exactly how much that hurts. So what do? Clara crossed the room to stand in front of him. We make a choice. We can let fear win, keep all these walls up, and stay safe but alone. Or we can take the risk and see where this goes. And if it ends badly, then at least we'll have tried. Clara reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. I didn't come to Montana to play it safe, Silas. I came to live. Really live. And I can't do that if I'm too scared to take chances. Silas covered her hand with his, pressing it against his cheek. You're braver than I am. No, I'm just more stubborn, she smiled. And I think you're plenty brave. You just need to remember that. For a long moment they stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath, suspended in a moment that felt both endless and fleeting. Then Silas lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't passionate or desperate. It was gentle, tentative, like a question being asked. Clara answered by leaning into him, her free hand coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palm, matching the wild rhythm of her own. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. That was, Silas started. A beginning, Clara finished. Just a beginning. Is that enough? For now? Yes. She stepped back, giving them both space to breathe. Go check on the horses. I'll make us some supper, and then we'll figure out what comes next. Silas nodded, but he didn't move immediately. He just looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. What? Clara asked, suddenly self-conscious. I'm just realizing how lucky I am that you answered my letter. Luck had nothing to do with it. I chose you, remember? 3 proposals, and I chose the honest one. Best decision you ever made? Clara pretended to consider. Ask me again in another 3 weeks. Silas laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his whole face. Clara found herself laughing too, and for a moment, the weight of the day lifted. Then Silas sobered. We still need to talk about what happens next. The land grabbers might be scattered, but the problem isn't gone. Men like that always come back. Then we'll face them together, just like today. Together, Silas repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. So do I. He left then, heading out to the barn, and Clara stood alone in the cabin that was slowly starting to feel like home. Her hands were steadier now, and the numbness was fading, replaced by a quiet certainty. She'd killed 2 men today. That weight would stay with her, probably for the rest of her life. But she'd also saved Silas's life, and he'd saved hers, and in that moment of crisis, they'd become something more than 2 strangers bound by a legal document. They'd become partners. Clara set about making supper, her movements automatic. As she worked, she found herself humming, a tune her mother used to sing, something about love coming when you least expect it. She'd expected cold practicality when she came to Montana. A roof over her head, basic respect, maybe some companionship if she was lucky. She hadn't expected this. This warmth spreading through her chest. This hope blooming despite everything. This feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd found exactly where she was supposed to be. When Silas returned, he found the table set and Clara waiting with a smile that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. You're in a better mood, he observed. I'm choosing to be, Clara said simply. We could sit here and dwell on all the horrible things that happened today, or we could eat this meal, be grateful we're both alive, and remember that tomorrow's a new day. You make it sound easy. It's not, but it's necessary. She handed him a plate. Sit, eat, and tell me about the rest of the fight. I want to know what happened after you left. So Silas told her about the running battle through the foothills, about how the sheriff's men had managed to kill 4 of the land grabbers and capture 3 more, about how the remaining few had scattered into the mountains, probably heading for Canada or Wyoming. Sheriff says we should be safe now, Silas finished. But he wants us all to stay vigilant. These things have a way of coming back around. Then we'll be ready. They finished eating in comfortable silence, and as Clara cleared the dishes, she felt Silas watching her. What is it? She asked. I've been thinking about what you said, about taking chances and really living. He stood and came to stand beside her. I want to try, Clara. I want to try to be the kind of man who deserves what you're offering. You already are that man. You just need to believe it. Silas took her hand again, and this time he didn't let go. They stood there in the lamplight, hands joined, and Clara felt a shift in the air between them, something fragile and new, like the first ice breaking on a spring creek. I've been thinking, Silas said, his voice rough. Maybe it's time I stopped sleeping by the fire. Clara's heart skipped. What are you saying? I'm saying, this is your home as much as mine, and if we're going to be partners, real partners, then maybe we should start acting like it. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Unless you're not ready for that. Are you? I don't know, but I'm tired of being afraid. Silas lifted her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. Feel that? It's been dead for 3 years. But when I thought I might lose you today, it started beating again. That has to mean something. Clara could feel the steady thump beneath her palm, strong and alive. It means you're human, Silas. It means you're capable of feeling again, even when you thought you weren't. And what about you? What do you feel? The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Clara took a breath and gave it to him. I feel terrified. I feel hopeful. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something that could either save me or destroy me, and I don't know which." She met his eyes. "But I also feel alive for the first time in years, and I'm not ready to give that up." Silas pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. "Then don't. Don't give it up. Don't give us up." "Us," Clara repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." This time when he kissed her, it was different, deeper, more certain, like a promise being made. Clara kissed him back with everything she had, pouring 3 weeks of loneliness and hope and fear into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Stay with me tonight," Silas whispered against her hair. "Not because you have to, because you want to." "I want to," Clara said. "God help me. I want to." They moved to the bedroom together, and Clara felt her hand shaking as Silas lit the lamp. The room looked different now, less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary. He turned to face her, and she saw the same fear and hope reflected in his eyes. "We don't have to rush anything," he said. "I just want you close. I want to know you're here, that you're real, that I didn't imagine all of this." Clara smiled and reached up to touch his face. "I'm real, and I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." They lay down together, fully clothed, just holding each other in the darkness. Clara listened to Silas's heartbeat, steady and strong, and felt something inside her settle. "Tell me about her," she said softly. "About Rebecca." Silas went very still. "Why?" "Because she was part of your life, and I want to know you, all of you." Clara lifted her head to look at him. "You said we don't talk about the past, but I think maybe we need to, just this once." For a long moment, Silas didn't speak. Then, haltingly, he began. "She was young, too young, probably. 18 when we married. I was 23 and thought I knew everything." His voice was thick with old pain. "She was sweet and gentle, and completely unprepared for the hardness of this life. I should have seen that. Should have protected her better." "What happened?" "She got pregnant right away. We were both so happy, so sure everything would be perfect." Silas's arms tightened around Clara. "But the pregnancy was hard. She was sick constantly, could barely keep anything down. The midwife said it was normal, that she'd get better. But she didn't. She just got weaker and weaker." Clara's throat tightened. "Oh, Silas." "When her time came, the baby wouldn't turn. The midwife tried everything, but—" His voice broke. "It took 36 hours. 36 hours of her screaming and bleeding and begging me to make it stop. And I couldn't. I couldn't do a goddamn thing except watch her die." "That wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I got her pregnant. I brought her to this godforsaken place. Stop." Clara sat up, forcing him to look at her. "You loved her. You gave her a home and a life. What happened was a tragedy, but it wasn't your fault."
Women die in childbirth every day, in cities and towns and places with real doctors. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's not your fault. Then why does it feel like it is? Because you loved her. And when we lose someone we love, we always think we could have done more, could have saved them somehow. Clara's eyes stung. "I felt the same way when my mother died. I kept thinking if I'd just noticed her symptoms sooner, if I'd just insisted she see a doctor, maybe she'd still be alive. But that's different." "It's not different at all. We both lost people we loved, and we both blamed ourselves.
But blame doesn't bring them back, Silas. It just keeps us stuck in the past. Silas pulled her back down against him, and Clara felt wetness on his cheeks. He was crying, silent, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. She held him through it, stroking his hair, letting him grieve in a way he probably hadn't allowed himself to do in 3 years. When the storm finally passed, Silas's voice was hoarse. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. And I deserve you. We both deserve a second chance at happiness." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time since Clara arrived, neither of them slept alone. Morning came too soon. Clara woke to find Silas already up, standing by the window, his expression troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up. "Sheriff's here, and he's got someone with him." Clara dressed quickly and followed Silas outside. The sheriff was indeed there, along with a well-dressed man Clara didn't recognize. The stranger had the look of a city lawyer, clean hands, expensive clothes, and calculating eyes. "Morning, Cade," the sheriff said, tipping his hat to Clara. "Ma'am, this here is Mr. Thornton. He's representing the Montana Land Company." Silas's jaw clenched. "What do you want, Thornton?" Thornton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here to make you an offer, Mr. Cade, a very generous offer for your property. It's not for sale. I think you'll want to hear the terms before you make that decision." Thornton pulled out a document. "The Montana Land Company is willing to pay $5,000 for this homestead. That's more than twice what it's worth." Clara felt her stomach drop. $5,000 was a fortune. But the way Thornton smiled told her this wasn't generosity. It was a threat. "Why?" Silas asked flatly. "Why do you want this land so badly?" "The company is consolidating holdings in this region. It's nothing personal, just business." Thornton's smile widened. "Of course, if you choose not to sell, well, accidents happen out here. Fires, floods, droughts. It would be a shame if something happened to this lovely property." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Now hold on, Thornton. You can't just—" "Can't what, Sheriff? I'm simply making a business proposition. What Mr. Cade chooses to do with that information is entirely up to him." Silas took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. "Get off my land." "Mr. Cade, I strongly suggest you reconsider." "I said get off my land. Now, before I help you off." Thornton's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. The company doesn't take no for an answer." "Then the company is going to learn something new today." Silas's voice was deadly calm. "This is my home, my wife's home, and we're not selling. Not for 5,000, not for 50,000. Not ever." Clara's heart swelled at the word wife said with such conviction. She moved to stand beside Silas, presenting a united front. "You heard my husband," she said coolly. "You're not welcome here." Thornton looked between them, his eyes narrowing. "I see. Well, don't say I didn't warn you." He mounted his horse. "The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, well, the company has other ways of acquiring property." He rode off, leaving the sheriff looking uncomfortable. "Silas, Clara, you need to be careful," the sheriff said. "The Montana Land Company has been buying up every homestead in the valley. The ones who won't sell? Things happen to them." "Like what happened to the Hendersons?" Clara asked sharply. The sheriff's face darkened. "We can't prove the company was behind that. But yeah, I've got my suspicions." "So what are you saying? That we should just sell and let these bastards win?" Silas's voice was hard. "I'm saying you should be smart. $5,000 is enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere safer. This is our home, Clara said firmly. We're not running. The sheriff sighed. Then watch your backs, both of you. And if anything suspicious happens, you come find me immediately. Understand? After he left, Silas and Clara stood in the yard, the morning sun doing nothing to warm the chill that had settled over them. We should have seen this coming, Silas said bitterly. The land grabbers yesterday were probably working for the company, testing our defenses. Then we make our defenses stronger. Clara crossed her arms. We're not giving up our home without a fight. Clara, you don't understand what you're up against. The Montana Land Company has money, lawyers, hired guns. And we have each other. We have right on our side. And we have something they don't. What's that? Everything to lose. Clara turned to face him. This isn't just land to us, Silas. It's our future, our life. They can't buy that, and they can't take it unless we let them. Silas studied her for a long moment. You really mean that? Every word. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. Then we fight. Together. Together, Clara agreed. The next 2 days were tense. Silas and Clara worked together to fortify the cabin, boarding up windows, stockpiling supplies, cleaning and loading every weapon they had. They didn't sleep much, taking turns keeping watch through the night. On the morning of the third day, Thornton returned. This time, he had 4 men with him, all armed. Silas met them in the yard, rifle in hand. Clara stood on the porch, her own rifle ready. I'm disappointed, Mr. Cade, Thornton said. I really hoped you'd reconsider. The answer is still no. Now get off my property. I'm afraid I can't do that. Thornton pulled out another document. You see, the Montana Land Company has acquired the deed to this property through perfectly legal means. A debt your previous owner never paid. The land is ours, and you're trespassing. That's a lie, Silas roared. I've got the deed right here, free and clear. A forged deed, I'm afraid. The company has documentation proving otherwise. Thornton smiled coldly. You have until sundown to vacate. If you're still here after that, we'll be forced to remove you, by whatever means necessary. Clara's blood ran cold. This is fraud. The sheriff will do nothing. He has no jurisdiction over property disputes. Thornton tipped his hat. Sundown, Mr. and Mrs. Cade. I suggest you start packing. They rode away, leaving Silas and Clara staring after them in shock and fury. They can't do this, Clara said, her voice shaking. They can't just steal our land. They can, and they are. Silas threw his rifle down. God damn it! I should have known they'd try something like this. Then we fight it in court. We get a lawyer, we prove our deed is real. With what money? With what time? By the time we get a lawyer and a court date, they'll have torn this place down and built something new. Silas ran his hands through his hair. They've won, Clara. They've fucking won. No! Clara's voice was steel. No, they haven't. Not yet. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that we have until sundown. That's 8 hours. 8 hours to find a way to stop them. There is no way to stop them. Then we make one. Clara grabbed his arms, forcing him to look at her. I didn't kill 2 men to defend this land just to hand it over to some crooked company. I didn't fall in love with you just to watch you give up now. Silas froze. What did you say? Clara's eyes widened as she realized what she'd just admitted. You said you fell in love with me. Silas, that's not the point right now. The hell it's not. He pulled her close, his eyes intense. Say it again. We don't have time for this. Say it again, Clara. She took a shaky breath. I love you. I didn't mean to, and I know it's too soon, and I know we've only known each other a month, but I love you. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take you or this home away from me." Silas kissed her hard, desperately, then pulled back with fire in his eyes. "Then we fight. You're right. We fight until there's nothing left to fight with."
"So what do we do?" Silas was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his expression changed. "The original deed, the one I got when I bought this land. It's registered in the county office in Helena. If we can prove their documents are fake..." "Helena is 2 days' ride from here." "Not if we push hard. 1 day there, 1 day back if we don't stop." Silas was already moving toward the barn. "We leave now, we can be back by tomorrow night." "But Thornton said sundown today." "Thornton can go to hell. They're not taking this land without a fight, legal or otherwise." Silas started saddling the horses. "Pack light. Just what we absolutely need." Clara rushed inside and grabbed their essentials: food, water, the deed, their small savings, and both handguns. When she emerged, Silas had both horses ready. They rode hard, pushing the animals to their limits. The landscape blurred past them as they raced against time and greed and corruption. Clara's thighs ached. Her back screamed, but she didn't complain. Beside her, Silas rode with grim determination, his jaw set. They reached Helena just after midnight, exhausted and filthy. The county office wouldn't open until morning, so they found a cheap hotel and collapsed into bed, too tired to do more than hold each other. "What if it doesn't work?" Clara whispered in the darkness. "What if their documents look legitimate?" "Then we'll find another way. I promise you, Clara. I'm not losing you or our home. Not without a fight." Morning came, and they were at the county office before it even opened. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "We need to verify a land deed," Silas said, sliding their document across the counter. The clerk examined it carefully, then went into the back room. She was gone for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. When she returned, she looked troubled. "This deed is legitimate and properly registered," she said slowly. "But there's a problem." Clara's heart sank. "What problem?" "There's a second claim on file, filed 3 days ago by the Montana Land Company, stating they have prior ownership through an unpaid debt." The clerk pulled out another document. "According to this, the previous owner, a Mr. William Garrett, owed the company $1,500 when he sold you the property. The debt transferred with the land." "That's impossible," Silas said. "Garrett told me the land was clear. I have it in writing." "Do you have documentation proving the debt was paid?" Silas and Clara exchanged glances. "No," he admitted. "I took his word for it." The clerk's expression softened. "I'm sorry, but without proof the debt was satisfied, their claim might hold up in court. You'll need to get a lawyer." "We don't have time for a lawyer," Clara said desperately. "They're forcing us off the land today." "Then I suggest you find Mr. Garrett and get him to testify that the debt was paid. That's your only option."
They left the office in despair. Finding Garrett seemed impossible. The man had left Montana months ago, destination unknown. "We're out of options," Silas said, his voice hollow. "We rode all the way here for nothing." "No," Clara grabbed his arm. "We're not done yet. Where would Garrett have gone? Did he have family? Friends?" "He mentioned a sister in Oregon. Portland, maybe?" Silas shook his head. "But that's weeks away by train, even if we could afford the fare." Clara thought hard, her mind racing. Then it hit her. The bank. If Garrett paid off any debt, he would have done it through a bank. There would be a record. Hope flickered in Silas's eyes. The Helena Bank. He did all his business there. They ran to the bank, bursting through the doors and startling the customers. The bank manager listened to their frantic explanation, his expression skeptical.
"I'll need to check the records," he said. "This will take some time."
"We don't have time," Clara pleaded. "Please, our home depends on this."
Something in her voice must have moved him, because he nodded. "Wait here." 30 agonizing minutes later, he returned with a ledger. Mr. William Garrett did indeed have a debt with the Montana Land Company. $1,500, as you said. The manager ran his finger down the page. And it was paid in full on March 15th, 1884, 14 months before he sold you the property. Clara felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. "You have proof?" "Right here in our records, and I can provide a notarized statement to that effect." Silas grabbed the man's hand and shook it vigorously. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Just doing my job, son. But you folks better get that statement to a judge fast. The Montana Land Company doesn't take kindly to being proven wrong." They rode back even harder than they'd come, the precious bank statement tucked safely in Clara's satchel. They pushed through the night, changing horses at a way station, driven by desperation and hope. They reached home just as the sun was setting on the second day, exactly when Thornton had given them the deadline. Thornton was there, along with a dozen men, preparing to evict them by force. When he saw Silas and Clara riding up, his face twisted with rage. "You're too late," he snarled. "This land is ours now." "Like hell it is." Silas dismounted and pulled out the bank statement. "The debt was paid 14 months before I bought this property. Your claim is fraudulent." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "That document could be forged. It's notarized by the Helena Bank and signed by the bank manager. You want to call him a liar?" Silas stepped closer. "Your scam is over, Thornton. Get off my land before I throw you off." For a moment, it looked like Thornton might order his men to attack anyway. But then the sheriff appeared, riding up with 5 deputies. "I heard there might be trouble out here," the sheriff said, his hand resting on his gun. "Everything all right, Cade?" "Just fine, Sheriff. Mr. Thornton here was just leaving." Thornton's jaw clenched so hard, Clara thought she heard teeth crack. "This isn't over." "Yes," Clara said firmly. "It is. You lost. Now get off our property." The hired guns looked at each other nervously, then at the sheriff's deputies. Finally, one by one, they mounted their horses and rode away. Thornton was the last to leave, his parting look promising revenge. When they were finally alone, Silas and Clara stood in their yard, exhausted but victorious. The sheriff tipped his hat and left them to their peace. "We did it," Clara whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Silas corrected. "If you hadn't thought of checking the bank—" "We did it together," Clara insisted. "That's what matters." Silas pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "I meant what I said back there. This is our home. Ours. And no one is ever taking it away from us." Clara looked up at him, seeing the man he'd become over the past month. Stronger, more open, more alive. "I love you, Silas Cade." "I love you too, Clara. God help me. I love you so much it scares me." "Then let's be scared together. Let's build this life together. Let's be happy together." "Together," Silas agreed, and kissed her as the sun set on their hard-won home. That night, they made love for the first time, not out of obligation or arrangement, but out of genuine desire and love. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Clara traced the scars on Silas's chest
and listened to his breathing slow. "Tell me what you're thinking," she whispered. "I'm thinking that I don't deserve this. Any of this." His voice was rough with emotion. "I spent 3 years convinced I'd never feel anything again, that I was broken beyond repair. And then you showed up and proved me wrong." "You were never broken, Silas. Just hurt. There's a difference." He turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You were honest. You were yourself. And you let me in when every instinct told you to keep me out." Clara kissed him softly. "That took more courage than fighting off those land grabbers." "I was terrified." "I know. So was I." She nestled closer. "But we did it anyway. And now look where we are." Silas held her tighter. "I never want to let you go." "Then don't." They drifted off to sleep wrapped around each other. And for the first time in 3 years, Silas didn't dream of death. He dreamed of life, of a future, of children running through the yard, and Clara's laughter filling the cabin. When he woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and Clara was already up, humming as she made breakfast. He lay there for a moment, just watching her, still half convinced this was a dream. "I can feel you staring," Clara said without turning around. "Can't help it. You're beautiful." She laughed. "I'm covered in trail dust and wearing a dress that's seen better days. I'm about as far from beautiful as—" "You're wrong." Silas got up and crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Clara leaned back against him. "Sweet talker." "Just honest." He kissed her neck. "What are you making?" "Pancakes. I found some maple syrup in the back of the cupboard." She turned in his arms. "Silas, I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "This cabin. It's too small for the life we're going to build." She gestured around them. "1 bedroom, barely enough space for the 2 of us. If we're going to have a real home, we need to expand." Silas felt his chest tighten. "You're talking about children?" "Eventually, yes, but also just making this place ours. Not Rebecca's cabin where I happen to live. Ours." Clara searched his face. "Is that too much? Am I pushing too hard?" "No, you're right." Silas took a deep breath. "I've been thinking the same thing. This cabin is full of ghosts. Good memories, but also painful ones. If we're going to move forward, we need to make new memories." "So we rebuild?" "We rebuild. Add another room, maybe 2. Expand the kitchen. Build a proper porch." Silas smiled. "Make it a real home." Clara's eyes lit up. "When do we start?" "Today, if you want. I've got lumber stored in the barn. Been saving it for, well, I didn't know what for. But this seems right." They spent the morning planning, sketching out ideas on scraps of paper, arguing good-naturedly about where things should go. Clara wanted the new bedroom to face east for the morning sun. Silas wanted the kitchen expansion to include a proper pantry. "We're going to need help," Clara said finally. "This is more work than 2 people can handle alone." "I can ask the neighbors. The Mitchells owe me a favor after I helped them with their barn last year." "And I can ask some of the women from town. Mrs. Henderson survived the fire. She's staying with her daughter. Maybe helping us rebuild will give her something to focus on besides her grief." Silas looked at her with admiration. "You've thought this through." "I've had time. All those hours keeping watch while you were gone, I was planning our future." Clara smiled. "Someone had to believe we'd have one." Over the next week, neighbors started arriving. The Mitchells came first, bringing their 2 oldest sons. Then came the Coopers, the Jamesons, and even old Widow Peterson, who brought fresh bread and sharp-tongued advice.
Mrs. Henderson came too, her face still hollow with grief, but her hands steady as she helped Clara organize supplies.
"Thank you for including me," she said quietly. "I didn't know what to do with myself." "We're glad you're here," Clara said, squeezing her hand. "Building something new helps heal old wounds." "Does it?" Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked. "Because I don't think I'll ever stop seeing my husband burning in that." "You won't forget. The pain will always be there, but it won't always be this sharp." Clara spoke from hard-earned experience. "My mother died 2 years ago, and some days it still hits me like it happened yesterday. But other days, I can think of her and smile instead of cry. That's healing. Not forgetting, just learning to carry the weight." Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. "Your husband is lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." The work progressed faster than expected. Silas and the men framed out 2 new rooms, while Clara and the women worked on the interior. They tore down the old curtains, scrubbed years of accumulated grime, and started transforming the dark, austere cabin into something warm and welcoming. One afternoon, while Silas was up on the roof with Mitchell, Clara found the box of baby clothes in the chest. She stood there for a long moment, holding one of the tiny garments, unsure what to do. "You should ask him," Mrs. Henderson said softly, coming up beside her. "Ask him what?" "What he wants done with them. They're his past, but you're his future. He needs to decide which one gets to stay." That evening, after everyone had gone home, Clara brought up the subject carefully. "I found the baby things again today," she said. "I didn't know if you wanted to keep them or—" "Give them to Mrs. Henderson," Silas said without hesitation. "Her daughter is expecting. They should go to someone who can use them." Clara blinked in surprise.
"Are you sure?"
"I'm sure." Silas pulled her close. "Those things belong to a different life. A life I can honor and remember without letting it control my future. Rebecca would want them used, not packed away gathering dust." "That's very generous of you." "It's not generous. It's necessary." He tilted her chin up to look at him. "I love you, Clara, and I want to build a life with you that isn't haunted by what I lost. That doesn't mean forgetting Rebecca or the baby. It just means choosing to live again." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. "When did you get so wise?" "When you showed up on that platform and refused to let me hide anymore." Silas wiped away her tears. "You saved me, Clara, even when I didn't want to be saved." The next day, Clara gave the baby clothes to Mrs. Henderson, who wept and thanked her repeatedly. Watching the older woman clutch the tiny garments, Clara felt Silas's hand slip into hers. "You did a good thing," he murmured. "We did a good thing," Clara corrected. By the end of the second week, the expansion was nearly complete. They had 2 new bedrooms, an enlarged kitchen, and a wide front porch that stretched across the entire front of the cabin. The place looked transformed, bigger, brighter, more alive. On the last day of construction, as they were putting the finishing touches on the porch railing, a rider appeared on the horizon. Clara's stomach dropped when she recognized Thornton. "Not again," she muttered. Silas's jaw tightened. "Stay behind me." But Thornton wasn't alone this time. He had a woman with him, elegantly dressed, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Cade, Mrs. Cade." Thornton's voice was stiff. "This is Mrs. Margaret Ashford, head of the Montana Land Company." The woman dismounted with practiced grace and walked toward them. Clara noticed she didn't offer her hand. "I came to apologize," Mrs. Ashford said bluntly. "My employee acted outside the bounds of his authority. The company does not engage in fraud or intimidation." "Could have fooled us," Silas said coldly. Which is why I'm here personally, to make amends. She pulled out an envelope. This is a legal agreement stating the company has no claim to your property, now or in the future. It's been notarized and filed with the county. Clara exchanged a glance with Silas. Why? Because Mr. Thornton's actions have brought unwanted attention to our business practices. The territorial governor is asking questions. The newspapers are writing stories. Mrs. Ashford's expression was sour. It's bad for business, so I'm cleaning house, starting with making sure you two can't cause me any more trouble. In other words, you're protecting your reputation, not making things right, Clara said flatly. I'm a businesswoman, Mrs. Cade. I do what's necessary. Mrs. Ashford handed over the envelope. But the result is the same. Your land is safe.
You have my word. Your word doesn't mean much after what Thornton pulled, Silas said.
Which is why I'm giving you this. She pulled out a check. $10,000. Compensation for your troubles. Clara gasped. $10,000 was more money than she'd ever seen in her life. We don't want your money, Silas said. Take it anyway. Consider it an investment in goodwill. Mrs. Ashford's smile was thin. The company is planning a railroad through this valley. We'll need landowners who are cooperative, not hostile. This money ensures you'll remember us favorably when the time comes. We're not selling our land for a railroad either, Clara said. I'm not asking you to sell. I'm asking you to allow right-of-way when the surveyors come through. In exchange for fair compensation, of course. Silas and Clara looked at each other. A railroad through the valley would mean prosperity for everyone. Easier shipping, more settlers, actual civilization within reach.
We'll consider it, Silas said finally.
When the time comes. But this money is yours regardless. Call it a gesture of goodwill, or call it guilt money. I don't care what you call it. Mrs. Ashford remounted her horse. Mr. Thornton is no longer employed by the company. He won't be bothering you again. She rode away, leaving Thornton to follow like a whipped dog. When they were gone, Clara opened the envelope and pulled out the check. $10,000, signed and legitimate. What do we do with this? She asked. We use it to build the life we want. Buy more land, more livestock. Maybe hire some help so we're not doing everything ourselves. Silas put his arm around her. We've earned it, Clara. God knows we've earned it. That night, they celebrated with their neighbors, sharing the news of their unexpected windfall. The cabin was filled with laughter and music and life. Everything it hadn't been for 3 years.
As the party wound down and people started heading home, Clara found herself standing on the new porch with Mrs. Henderson. You've built something special here, the older woman said. Not just a bigger house, a real home. We're trying. You're succeeding, Mrs. Henderson smiled sadly. My husband and I had 43 years together. Good years, hard years, everything in between. What you and Silas have, don't take it for granted. Don't waste a single day assuming you'll have tomorrow. Clara felt her throat tighten. I won't. I promise. After everyone left, Clara and Silas stood together on the porch, looking out over their land. The moon was full and bright, casting everything in silver light. I've been thinking, Silas said quietly, about what Mrs. Henderson said, about not wasting time. What about it? We should have a real wedding, not the rushed courthouse thing we did, but a real celebration, with our friends and neighbors, with vows we actually mean. Clara's heart swelled. You want to marry me again?
I want to marry you properly. I want to stand in front of everyone we know and tell them that you're my wife, my partner, my everything. I want them to know that what we have is real. It was always real, Clara said softly. But now it's right. Now it's what it should have been from the start. Silas took her hands, Marry me, Clara. Again. For real this time." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course yes." They held their second wedding 3 weeks later. The whole valley turned out for it. Clara wore a simple white dress she'd made herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Silas wore his best suit, his face shining with happiness. The sheriff officiated, since the circuit preacher wouldn't arrive for another month. He kept it simple and heartfelt. "Do you, Silas Cade, take this woman to be your wife? To love and honor, in sickness and in health, for all the days of your life?" "I do." Silas's voice rang out clear and strong. "God is my witness, I do." "And do you, Clara Cade, take this man to be your husband, to love and honor, in sickness and in health, for all the days of your life?" "I do." Clara smiled through tears. "With all my heart, I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." "Again," the sheriff grinned. "You may kiss your bride." "Again." Silas pulled Clara into a kiss that made the crowd cheer and whistle. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was dancing and food, and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to bawdy. Clara danced with Silas, then with Mitchell, then with old Mr. Cooper, who stepped on her toes 3 times, but made her laugh until she cried. As the stars came out, Silas led Clara away from the crowd to the far edge of their property, where they could see the whole valley spread out before them. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Me too." He pulled her close. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "This is just the beginning. We've got years ahead of us. Decades if we're lucky. And I plan to spend every single day showing you how much I love you." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "That sounds like a good plan." "It's the only plan I've got, but it's a damn good one." They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, listening to the sounds of celebration drifting across the land. Their land, their home, their future. "Silas?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for sending that letter. Thank you for being honest about what you wanted. Thank you for giving me a chance to find this." Clara gestured at everything around them. "Thank you for being exactly who you are." "I should be thanking you. You're the one who took a chance on a broken-down widower with nothing to offer but a cold cabin and a hard life." "You offered me honesty, freedom, respect. That's more than most women ever get." Clara turned in his arms. "And you offered me something else, something I didn't even know I needed." "What's that?" "A second chance. At life. At love. At happiness." She kissed him softly. "You gave me permission to hope again." Silas held her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "You gave me the same thing. You walked into my life and reminded me that the heart can heal. That love doesn't die just because we lose someone. It just finds new ways to grow." "I love you, Silas Cade." "I love you too, Clara. More than words can say." They walked back to the celebration, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Always together. The party finally wound down around midnight. The last guests departed with hugs and well wishes, leaving Silas and Clara alone in their transformed home. "Well, Mrs. Cade," Silas said, sweeping her up into his arms. "Ready to start our new life?" "I thought we already started it." That was the prologue. This is the real story. He carried her toward the bedroom. And it's going to be one hell of a story. Clara laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Promise?" "I promise. No more cold arrangements, no more loveless marriages. Just us, building something real." "Just us," Clara agreed. "Building everything." He kicked the bedroom door shut behind them, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Coming to Montana, answering his letter, choosing the honest man over the comfortable lie. This was where she belonged. This was home. And this, finally, was love. The morning after their second wedding, Clara woke to find Silas already dressed and standing by the window, his expression troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up. "Nothing's wrong. I'm just thinking." He turned to her. "About the railroad Mrs. Ashford mentioned, about what it means for this valley. We said we'd consider it when the time came. The time is coming sooner than we thought. I saw surveyors yesterday, down by the creek. They're already mapping out routes." Clara's stomach tightened. "Did you talk to them?" "Briefly. They said the company wants to start construction by spring. They'll need to cut through our eastern pasture." "And if we say no?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. "Then they'll route around us. But it'll hurt our neighbors, the Mitchells, the Coopers. Their livelihoods depend on easier access to markets. If we block the best route out of spite, we're hurting everyone." Clara got up and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "So we let them through. We negotiate fair compensation and make sure they don't destroy our land in the process." "It's not that simple. Once the railroad comes, everything changes. More people, more development. This quiet life we're building, it won't stay quiet for long. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's time this valley grew up a little." Clara rested her cheek against his back. "Besides, we can't stop progress. We can only decide how we respond to it." Silas turned and pulled her close. "When did you get so wise? I married a good teacher." 3 months later, Clara stood in the kitchen kneading bread dough when a wave of nausea hit her so hard she had to grip the counter to stay upright. "Clara?" Silas was at her side immediately. "What's wrong?" "I'm fine. Just felt dizzy for a moment." "You've been dizzy a lot lately, and you barely touched breakfast this morning." His eyes narrowed. "How long has this been going on?" Clara felt her face heat. "A few weeks." "A few weeks? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wasn't sure. I didn't want to get your hopes up if I was wrong." She met his eyes. "But I'm not wrong, Silas. I'm pregnant." The color drained from his face. You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. I've missed 2 courses. I'm sick every morning, and I can't stand the smell of coffee anymore." Clara's voice trembled. "Are you happy, or are you terrified?" "Both." Silas pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "God, Clara, I'm both. I want this more than anything, but after what happened with Rebecca, I'm not Rebecca, and this isn't the same situation." Clara pulled back to look at him. "I'm strong and healthy. I've got you, I've got the women in town, and when the time comes, we'll get the best doctor money can buy. We have options now. Money, resources. We didn't have any of that before." "I can't lose you. I won't survive it." "You won't lose me. I promise you, Silas. I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her desperately, and Clara felt his hands shaking against her back. This was his greatest fear made manifest, the possibility of losing another wife, another child. But she refused to let that fear control their joy. "We're going to be parents," she said firmly. "We're going to have a family, and it's going to be wonderful." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I choose to believe it. Because fear doesn't get to win anymore." Clara took his face in her hands. We've fought off killers and crooked businessmen. We've survived fraud and violence and everything this harsh land could throw at us. You think a baby is going to defeat us? Silas laughed shakily. When you put it that way. Exactly. So no more terror, just joy, just hope, just us building the family we both want. He rested his forehead against hers. I love you so damn much. I love you too. Now help me finish this bread before I get sick again. The news spread through the valley like wildfire. The women descended on their cabin with advice, supplies, and stories, some helpful, most terrifying. Mrs. Henderson appointed herself Clara's unofficial guardian, checking on her daily and threatening Silas with bodily harm if he let anything happen to her. I survived my husband's death, she told him grimly, but I won't survive watching another young woman go through what Rebecca did. So you take care of her, you hear me? Yes, ma'am, Silas said meekly. As winter settled in, Clara's belly grew. She felt the baby move for the first time while she was mending Silas's shirt, a flutter so faint she almost missed it. She grabbed Silas's hand and pressed it to her stomach. Did you feel that? I felt something. Was that? The baby kicked again, harder this time. Silas's eyes went wide. That's our child, Clara whispered. That's our baby saying hello. Silas's face crumpled, and he buried his face against her belly, his shoulders shaking. Clara ran her fingers through his hair, letting him grieve and rejoice all at once. It's real, he choked out. This is really happening. It's really happening, and it's going to be okay. Better than okay. But then the railroad surveyors came back with bad news. The route they'd planned cut directly through the Henderson property, or what was left of it after the fire. We need the land, the lead surveyor told a gathering of homesteaders. The company is prepared to offer compensation, but if Mrs. Henderson won't sell, we'll have to reroute, which means the station won't be built here. It'll be 20 miles south, and this valley will be bypassed entirely. That'll destroy us, Mitchell said angrily. Everything we've built depends on having rail access. Then convince Mrs. Henderson to sell, the surveyor said flatly. After the meeting, Clara found Mrs. Henderson sitting alone on the steps of the schoolhouse, crying. They're trying to take the last piece of him, the older woman sobbed. That land is all I have left. The memories, the 43 years we spent there. They want me to sell it for a railroad line? What do you want? Clara asked gently, sitting beside her. I want my husband back. I want my home back. I want my life back. Mrs. Henderson wiped her eyes. But I can't have any of that. So instead, I have this burnt piece of earth that means nothing to anyone but me. It means something to you. That's what matters. But if I don't sell, I'm hurting everyone. The whole valley suffers because I can't let go of the past. She looked at Clara, her eyes red and swollen. What would you do? Clara thought carefully. I'd ask myself what my husband would have wanted. Would he want you clinging to land that brings you nothing but pain? Or would he want you to use that land to help your neighbors, your community? He'd want me to help them. He always put others first. Mrs. Henderson's voice broke. But selling feels like betraying him, like saying those years meant nothing. Those years meant everything, and selling the land doesn't erase them. Your memories aren't in the dirt, Mrs. Henderson. They're in here. Clara touched her heart. No one can take that from you. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Henderson agreed to sell. But instead of keeping the money, she donated half of it to build a proper church for the valley, in memory of her husband. He always wanted this place to have a real church, she told Clara. Now it will. That's a better memorial than burnt ground. The railroad construction began in early spring. Clara was 7 months pregnant and moving slowly, but she insisted on watching the first rails being laid. "History in the making," she told Silas, one hand on her swollen belly. "Just don't overdo it. Doctor's orders." The doctor said to stay active, not to become an invalid. Clara squeezed his hand. "Stop worrying so much." "I'll stop worrying when you're safely delivered and the baby's healthy." "That's still 2 months away." "You can't spend 2 months in a constant state of panic." "Watch me." But Silas's panic reached new heights a week later, when Clara went into labor early. She was hanging laundry when the first pain hit, sharp and unmistakable. "Silas!" she called out. "Silas, it's time!" He came running from the barn, his face white. "It's too early. You've got 6 more weeks. The baby doesn't care about our timeline. Get Mrs. Henderson and the midwife, now." Silas practically threw himself onto his horse and rode like hell was chasing him. Within an hour, the cabin was full of women, and Silas was pacing outside like a caged animal. "You need to calm down," Mitchell said, joining him on the porch. "You're going to wear a hole in those boards." "I can't calm down. She's in there suffering, and I can't do anything to help her." "You helped by getting her pregnant. Your job now is to wait and pray." "I'm not good at either of those things." "Then learn fast, because you're going to be doing a lot of both from now on." The hours crawled by. Silas could hear Clara's cries from inside, each one stabbing into his heart. He remembered Rebecca's screams, the endless agony, the terrible silence that followed. His hand shook so badly he couldn't hold his coffee cup. "She's going to be fine," Mitchell kept saying. "Clara's strong. She knows what she's doing." Rebecca was strong too. It didn't matter. "This isn't Rebecca. This is Clara. And Clara doesn't quit." Just when Silas thought he couldn't take another minute, he heard it. A baby's cry, high and strong and furious. The door opened, and Mrs. Henderson appeared, smiling. "You have a daughter, Silas, and Clara's asking for you." Silas's legs almost gave out. "She's alive? They're both alive?" "Very much so. Now get in there before your wife comes looking for you herself." He stumbled into the bedroom to find Clara propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Their daughter. "Meet Sarah," Clara said softly. "Sarah Rebecca Cade." Silas felt tears streaming down his face. "Rebecca? She should know who came before her, who we carry in our hearts." Clara held out the baby. "Come meet your daughter." With trembling hands, Silas took the infant. She was so small, so perfect, with Clara's dark hair and a face scrunched up in indignation at being removed from her mother's warmth. "Hello, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm your papa, and I'm going to love you and protect you for the rest of my life." The baby's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, and Silas felt his heart crack wide open. This was hope. This was redemption. This was everything he thought he'd lost forever. "Thank you," he told Clara, his voice breaking. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving us this. We gave it to each other." Clara smiled. "That's how this works. We build it together." Over the next months, they settled into the chaotic rhythm of new parenthood. Sarah was a demanding baby, loud, opinionated, and determined to be heard. Clara handled it with grace and humor. Silas handled it with panic and devotion. "She's crying again," he'd say, rushing to the cradle. "She's always crying. That's what babies do." "But what if something's wrong?" "Then we'll fix it, together, like we fix everything." The railroad station opened in July, bringing with it an influx of new settlers. The valley transformed almost overnight. More houses, more businesses, more life. Their quiet homestead became the edge of a growing town. "Things are changing," Silas said one evening, watching the lights from the new buildings in the distance. "They always do. That's life." Clara rocked Sarah gently. "But we're still here, still together. That's what matters."
Do you ever regret it? Answering my letter? Coming to this hard place? Clara looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Are you serious? Regret the best decision I ever made? Regret finding you? Finding us? Finding this life? I just wonder sometimes if you'd have been happier with one of those other proposals, the merchants or the banker, men who could have given you an easier life.
"Silas Cade, listen to me very carefully." Clara stood and handed him the baby. "I don't want easy. I never wanted easy. I wanted real. I wanted honest. I wanted a partner who saw me as an equal, not a possession. And I got all of that with you. But the violence, the threats, the struggle made us stronger, made us appreciate what we have." She crossed to him and wrapped her arms around both him and Sarah. "I chose you because your letter was honest about what our life would be. And I choose you again tomorrow, and every day after that. Do you understand?" "I'm starting to." "Good."
Because I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. You're my home. And no amount of change or progress or new settlers is going to alter that fact.
Sarah chose that moment to grab Silas's finger and hold tight, as if agreeing with her mother. Silas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I don't deserve either of you."
Stop saying that. You deserve all of this and more.
Clara kissed him softly. "Now come to bed. Tomorrow's a new day, and Sarah will be up at dawn demanding breakfast."
She gets that from you.
Damn right she does. As the years passed, their family grew. A son came next, then another daughter. The cabin expanded again and again until it was barely recognizable as the austere structure Clara had first entered. The valley prospered with the railroad, and their land value increased tenfold. But through it all, the growth, the prosperity, the chaos of raising 3 children, Silas and Clara held on to what mattered most: each other. One evening, 15 years after Clara first stepped off that stagecoach, they sat on their porch, watching the sunset, while their children played in the yard. Sarah was 14 now, beautiful and sharp-tongued like her mother. Their son James was 12, and already taller than Silas. Little Emma was 8, and convinced she could do anything her older siblings could do. "Do you remember our first night together?" Clara asked, leaning against Silas. "When you told me this was just a transaction." "I was an idiot." "You were scared. There's a difference," Clara smiled. "But look at what that transaction became." Silas looked at their children, their expanded home, the life they'd built together. "I prepared for a cold, loveless marriage. I thought that's all I deserved after losing Rebecca." "And what did you get instead?" "Everything. I got everything." He pulled her closer. "You brought me back to life, Clara. You gave me hope when I thought I'd run out. You gave me a family, a future, a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive. We gave that to each other. I was just as lost as you were when I arrived, just as broken, just as convinced I'd never be happy again." Clara turned to look at him. "But we found each other, and we built something that neither of us could have built alone. The best partnership I've ever known. The best love story I've ever lived." Their children called out, wanting their parents to settle an argument about who could climb the highest tree. Clara laughed and stood to referee, but Silas caught her hand. "I love you," he said. "More today than yesterday. More tomorrow than today. That's my promise to you. Forever. Forever, Clara agreed. No matter what comes. They walked toward their children together, hands clasped, hearts full.
What had started as a desperate arrangement between two broken people had transformed into something extraordinary. A partnership built on honesty, strengthened by adversity, and sustained by genuine love. The cold, loveless marriage Silas had expected never materialized. Instead, Clara brought him warmth, passion, purpose, and a lifetime of love that exceeded every dream he'd ever dared to dream. She'd taken his carefully constructed walls and demolished them brick by brick, until all that remained was a man capable of loving fully, living completely, and cherishing every moment of the life they'd created together. This wasn't just survival. This wasn't just making do with what they had. This was thriving. This was joy. This was exactly what both of them had been searching for without knowing it. A home, a family, and a love that would last not just a lifetime, but generations. Their children would tell their children about the mail-order bride who refused to accept a loveless arrangement, and the widower who learned that the heart could love again, stronger and deeper than before. Together, Silas and Clara had proven that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with passion, but with honest words, mutual respect, and two people brave enough to choose hope over fear, partnership over loneliness, and love over the safety of an empty heart.